911, what's your emergency? There's been a breach in the enclosure. The gorilla, he's gone. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the stillness of the night was shattered by the frantic call from a security guard at the Highland Primate Research Facility, a secluded lab tucked away deep in the Oregon wilderness. This wasn't just any animal facility. It was a top-secret research center, government-funded and shrouded in mystery. The guard's voice was shaky, filled with disbelief and fear. He had just discovered that Kumba, a massive silverback gorilla who had spent years in the facility's care, was missing. Kumba wasn't just a regular gorilla. He had become the focus of intense study, known for his advanced cognitive abilities. Some said he could communicate through sign language, while others swore he could even recognize faces and solve complex puzzles. But that night, Kumba wasn't in his enclosure. He had simply vanished without a trace. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no fur, nothing to suggest he had been taken or harmed. The enclosure was locked securely from the outside, and everything inside seemed untouched. The only clue left behind was a puzzle toy, half completed, just the way Kumba had always left it before bedtime. But the most unsettling detail of all? The surveillance cameras. The footage showed that for exactly 5 minutes, the cameras in the area went completely dark, cutting out right before the breach was reported. When they flickered back to life, all that was visible was the empty enclosure. No one knew how it happened. No one knew why. Kumba didn't escape. He vanished. As the first light of day crept over the horizon, the facility went into full lockdown. Every staff member, every researcher, every guard, and even the janitorial crew was questioned. Everyone was confused, and nothing seemed to make sense. Something wasn't adding up. That's when the call came in. Not from the police, not from local authorities. The FBI had arrived. The situation escalated quickly. The moment the FBI became involved, it was clear this wasn't just a missing animal case. Something bigger was at play, something the authorities weren't ready to explain. Special Agent Rebecca Sanchez was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator, Sanchez had dealt with everything from cybercrimes to organized crime syndicates, but a missing gorilla? That was something new. And yet there was something off about the whole situation. The lab was government-run, but it wasn't just about animal research. The agents were immediately briefed on Kumba's unusual background, a gorilla who had been part of several highly classified experiments over the years, funded by military grants. It was clear that Kumba wasn't your typical research subject. He was the subject of an ongoing study into primate intelligence, and the results had been groundbreaking. Kumba wasn't just smart. He was extraordinary. The more the FBI learned about the facility, the more questions arose. For one, Kumba had been part of a covert program codenamed Project Echo. The goal of the project was to enhance animal cognition for military and intelligence purposes. They believed that a highly intelligent animal could be used in covert operations, gathering intelligence in ways that humans couldn't. Some of the scientists involved spoke in hushed tones about Kumba's remarkable abilities. He could understand complex commands, recognize faces, and even demonstrate emotions in ways that defied previous research. But there was one thing that no one could explain: the strange behavior he'd been exhibiting in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. A handful of researchers began to report that Kumba had been acting erratically, more agitated than usual. He had started communicating using symbols he had never shown before, symbols that no one at the facility had taught him. They seemed like a message, but no one could decode them. As the FBI combed through his interactions, they discovered something unsettling. Kumba had been drawing strange symbols on the walls of his enclosure, signs that seemed to hint at an imminent escape or even a plan to expose the facility's secrets. Agent Sanchez began to suspect that Kumba's disappearance wasn't just about a gorilla escaping. She started questioning whether Kumba had been helped. Could someone at the facility have assisted him? Or was this all a carefully orchestrated escape? The more she dug into Kumba's past and the experiments he had been subjected to, the clearer it became. Someone knew more than they were letting on. As the FBI's investigation deepened, new revelations about the research facility began to surface. It wasn't just Kumba's intelligence that had made him such a valuable subject. It was what he had been involved in that truly raised the stakes. The more the agents uncovered, the clearer it became that Project Echo was far more than a simple behavioral study. The facility had been conducting highly classified experiments, pushing the boundaries of primate cognition. The goal was not only to enhance intelligence but to train animals for covert military missions. They were looking for a way to utilize animals in espionage and surveillance operations. Kumba, with his astonishing mental capabilities, was at the center of these experiments. But something about the secrecy surrounding his participation didn't sit right with Agent Sanchez. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that the facility had been hiding things that could explain why Kumba vanished in the first place. A whistleblower, a former researcher at the facility, came forward. His identity was protected, his voice distorted, but his words were damning. He spoke of the true nature of Project Echo, revealing that Kumba wasn't just part of an experiment. He had been an instrument in a secret program to enhance animal cognition to the point where they could be used for espionage. The researchers had tried to teach Kumba advanced communication methods, including the use of symbols and codes. But what they hadn't anticipated was Kumba's growing awareness of his own captivity. Over time, he began to rebel, using the symbols as a form of protest. He communicated messages that no one could fully understand, but they were clearly attempts to tell someone, to tell the world, what was really going on behind closed doors. The whistleblower revealed something even more chilling. Kumba had begun refusing certain tasks in his training, particularly the ones that involved surveillance or intelligence gathering. It was as if he had become aware of what the facility intended to do with him. And then, just weeks before his disappearance, something strange happened. Kumba had begun drawing complex maps of the facility, detailed enough that someone could use them to escape. The maps didn't just outline the research areas. They showed hidden rooms and areas of the facility that were off-limits to most of the staff. These weren't just drawings. They were blueprints of a place no one was supposed to know about. Agent Sanchez couldn't ignore the possibility. Kumba hadn't simply escaped, he had planned it. And the more she learned about the facility's inner workings, the more it seemed like the gorilla had not only become a symbol of rebellion, but also the key to uncovering a much larger conspiracy. Was Kumba's disappearance part of a larger plot to expose the facility's dark secrets? Or had he simply become too dangerous to keep around? The questions kept mounting. As Agent Sanchez and her team followed the trail of clues, they started to see a picture emerge, one that linked Kumba's disappearance to something far greater than just the life of a single gorilla. There were powerful forces at play, and Kumba had become an unwilling pawn in a high-stakes game that no one outside the facility could even begin to comprehend. As the investigation continued, the trail leading back to the Highland Primate Research Facility seemed to grow colder. No one had seen Kumba, and the FBI was at a dead end. But then, the whispers began. In the small towns surrounding the forest, people started talking about strange sightings, something big, moving silently through the trees at night. Local farmers, hunters, and hikers claimed they had seen a massive figure, standing taller than any bear, moving with purpose and grace. Some said it was Kumba, others weren't so sure, but one thing was clear. Whatever it wasn't normal. One night, a family hiking near the forest edge stumbled across a makeshift shelter. It was crude but well-built, with large branches woven together to form a kind of canopy. At first, they thought it might be the work of a homeless person or a wild animal, but when they got closer, something seemed off. The shelter was filled with odd objects, tools, blankets, and what appeared to be books. There was a map, too, an old, tattered thing with markings and strange symbols. The most disturbing part? The footprints leading into the shelter weren't human. They were too large, too wide, and they didn't match any known animal species. The family immediately called the authorities, and the FBI dispatched a team to investigate. What they found was both fascinating and unsettling. A wildlife tracker, hired to comb through the area for signs of Kumba, soon discovered something even more alarming. Using his expertise, he noticed subtle clues in the forest: broken branches, disturbed earth, and strange patterns in the ground. It wasn't just the way an animal might travel through the forest. It was as if someone or something was deliberately trying to stay hidden, moving in a way that suggested intelligence. The tracker followed the clues deep into the woods, and what he uncovered was more than just footprints. He found a series of signs that seemed to be left deliberately: branches bent in a certain direction, rocks stacked in specific patterns. These weren't random. It was as if Kumba, or someone guiding him, was leaving a trail for someone to follow without being detected. Then, a breakthrough. A hiker who had been wandering near the forest's edge came forward with a chilling story. Late one evening, he had heard what he described as low, grunting noises in the distance. At first, he assumed it was just a bear, but when he followed the sounds, he came face to face with something unexpected. There, in the dimming light of the forest, was a massive figure, standing on two legs, staring back at him with eyes that glowed in the moonlight. The hiker froze, too scared to move, but before he could react, the figure turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving no trace. The more the FBI investigated, the more they began to believe that Kumba wasn't just surviving in the wild. He was being helped. Who could be aiding him? Was it someone from the facility? Someone who knew the layout of the area? Or was it something even stranger? An underground network of people who believed in Kumba's cause. The whispers were growing louder, and with each new piece of evidence, it became clearer that Kumba's disappearance was no ordinary escape. Someone, or something, was out there, guiding the gorilla, and the FBI was no closer to finding out who. As the investigation continued to unravel, Agent Sanchez found herself faced with a growing web of secrecy and unanswered questions. The more they dug into Kumba's disappearance, the more it became evident that the gorilla's escape wasn't a simple act of flight. It was part of something far greater, something that reached deeper into the fabric of what had been happening at the Highland Primate Research Facility. But the breakthrough came when the FBI received an anonymous tip, an encrypted message sent through an untraceable channel. The message contained only one word: revolution. Along with the word was a location, an old, abandoned cabin deep in the forest, a place that had once been part of a network of underground animal rights activists. The cabin had been abandoned for years, but the tip suggested that it was where Kumba might have gone. It was a lead, but one that felt dangerously close to the edge of something darker than expected. Agent Sanchez and her team arrived at the cabin in the dead of night. The air was thick with tension as they cautiously approached the rotting structure, flashlights sweeping the area. Inside, the cabin was nearly empty, except for the remnants of what looked like a long-forgotten camp. There were faded posters on the walls advocating for animal rights, scattered papers filled with strange symbols, and photographs of primates, including one of Kumba. But the most chilling discovery came when they found a journal filled with detailed accounts of Kumba's time at the research facility. The entries chronicled his cognitive evolution, but they also described something else: a growing resistance. The journal's final pages spoke of a group of people, activists, who had been following Kumba's progress, believing that the gorilla was the key to exposing the dark experiments happening at the facility. They had been helping him, teaching him new ways to communicate and escape. The final entry was the most revealing. It was written in Kumba's own hand. The symbols were familiar, but this time they formed a coherent message: I am the voice. Let the world hear. Kumba had known. He had known all along that his escape was more than just a physical act. It was a call for help, a way to expose the truth to the world. The resistance group had been working with Kumba, helping him understand the significance of his intelligence and what he could accomplish if he broke free. They believed that his ability to communicate, his understanding of the world, could not only change the way humans saw animals, but could potentially bring down the entire facility and expose the truth behind Project Echo. Agent Sanchez stood there, holding the journal, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Kumba hadn't just escaped to find freedom. He had escaped to reveal something that no one at the facility had ever intended to let out: the dark, twisted truth of their experiments and the exploitation of a sentient being. The final revelation was clear. Kumba wasn't just a victim. He was a hero. He had sacrificed his freedom to ensure that the truth about the Highland Primate Research Facility would be heard. And now the world would finally know what had been happening in the shadows. The news of Kumba's escape and the revelations that followed sent shockwaves through the world. What had once been a hidden chapter in the world of scientific research was now exposed for all to see. The Highland Primate Research Facility, along with its top-secret Project Echo, was thrust into the spotlight. What had seemed like a quiet, isolated research facility was now the center of an international scandal. The FBI launched a full investigation, not just into Kumba's disappearance, but into the entire facility. Researchers and staff were interrogated, their roles in the covert experiments exposed. Documents surfaced that outlined the extent of the military-funded studies on primate cognition, projects aimed at creating sentient beings capable of espionage, surveillance, and intelligence gathering. The facility had violated every ethical boundary, treating animals as mere tools for military gain. But even as the truth came to light, questions remained. Where was Kumba? Despite widespread media attention and extensive searches, the silverback gorilla had completely vanished without a trace. Some believed he had been captured or killed in the wild, but others held out hope. Had Kumba gone into hiding, continuing his mission to expose the facility's dark secrets? Or had he found sanctuary with the help of those who had supported his escape? In the months that followed, a global movement emerged. Animal rights groups, fueled by Kumba's bravery and intelligence, began to push for changes in the way animals were treated in research. Protests erupted across the globe, calling for accountability and a full reckoning for the scientists and government officials involved in Project Echo. Laws were proposed to protect animal intelligence research from being exploited for military purposes, and the facility was shut down, its doors locked permanently. But even with all the attention and the outpouring of support, Kumba remained a symbol, both of what had been lost and what had been achieved. His intelligence, his ability to communicate, and his bravery had not only exposed a dark corner of the world, but had also sparked a movement. He had become a hero in the eyes of many, a creature who had transcended the boundaries of captivity to become the voice of those who could not speak for themselves. And yet, as the months turned to years, Kumba's whereabouts remained unknown. Some believed he was still out there, hiding in the wild, living free. Others thought he had been silenced by those who feared what he had exposed. The mystery of the missing gorilla, however, never truly faded. It lived on in the hearts of those who knew the truth, in the calls for justice, and in the hopes that one day Kumba would be found, and that his voice would continue to speak for those who could not. In the end, Kumba's story wasn't just about a missing animal. It was about the power of knowledge, the courage to fight for what's right, and the belief that even in the darkest places, one voice, one creature, can change the world. Kumba's legacy continued to grow long after his disappearance. He became more than just a story. It became a symbol of resistance, intelligence, and the fight for justice. People around the world rallied around his name, and his tale became a rallying cry for animal rights activists, researchers, and anyone who believed in the idea that all creatures, regardless of their species, deserve dignity and respect. The movement sparked by Kumba's escape and the ensuing revelations was powerful. New legislation began to pass in countries across the globe, ensuring that animal testing for military and intelligence purposes would be banned. Research institutions were forced to reconsider their methods and ethical standards, with Kumba's story serving as a constant reminder of the potential dangers of unchecked experimentation. But it wasn't just laws that changed. Kumba's legacy led to a shift in scientific thinking. Researchers began to explore the boundaries of animal cognition more responsibly, respecting the autonomy and intelligence of the creatures they studied. Kumba's story raised crucial questions about the ethics of research and forced the scientific community to confront uncomfortable truths about the ways in which humans had exploited animals for years. The story of Kumba's escape also led to the formation of new alliances. Animal rights organizations teamed up with former scientists from the facility, all united by a common goal: to ensure that no other animal would ever have to endure the kind of exploitation Kumba had faced. With new funding and international support, these groups worked tirelessly to rescue animals from dangerous research programs, rehabilitate them, and give them the opportunity to live out their lives in safety. In the years that followed, there were reports of other primates showing similar signs of intelligence to Kumba's. Some researchers even claimed that they had seen other gorillas and chimpanzees in captivity using advanced forms of communication, much like the techniques Kumba had developed. It was as if Kumba's escape had opened a door that could never be closed. The question of animal cognition was no longer just a theoretical debate. It was real, and it was something that humans could no longer ignore. Though Kumba himself was never found, his influence persisted. His story was taught in schools, his name was mentioned in research papers, and his image, once that of a captive animal, had become that of a symbol of freedom and resistance. A mural was painted in his honor at a university where animal cognition was being studied, depicting Kumba standing tall, his eyes piercing through the canvas as if calling out to the world. In the end, Kumba's impact went beyond just his time in the research facility. His courage, his fight for freedom, and his ability to inspire change left a lasting imprint on the world. He proved that even in the face of immense adversity, one voice, one creature, could alter the course of history. And while the mystery of his final whereabouts remains unsolved, his legacy continues to live on, a testament to the power of resilience, knowledge, and the unwavering pursuit of justice for those who cannot speak for themselves.